Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the 5th workshop for Community Companions. I'm your host and project coordinator, Zebnisa Rao, and I'm really happy to see you all here today. My co-host today is Farzana Siddiqui. Assalamu alaikum. Sister Farzana is a trained counsellor from Relate. She has worked in Northern Ireland and Richmond and is a valuable member of our project. Community Companions is a project of Hounslow Muslim Centre designed to support the elderly and vulnerable in our community. We have had a break for a couple of weeks, and today is the 5th workshop in a series to help engage and empower the elders in our community in matters related to medicine, mental health, hobbies, and social activities. If you have any questions or ideas for future workshops, these can be submitted via the links mentioned in the chat room, and you'll find details of the project email address and a phone number if you would like to be added to the WhatsApp group for the workshops. Our guest today is Dr. Naveed Sayed, who has spoken with us many times before. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back.
Welcome, Rahmatullah. Thank you for the invitation, and Eid Mubarak to everyone. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but alhamdulillah.
Oh yes, Eid Mubarak to you too. And just as an introduction to you, I'll mention Dr. Naveed is a consultant to Public Health England in communicable diseases. He studied medicine at Manchester University, has a postgraduate diploma in medical education and masters in public health. He was advisor for 2 years to the British High Commission in Pakistan, which is always a mouthful to say all of that. MashaAllah. Dr. Naveed will talk about the topic of interest today, and then we'll later open for questions and answers. And the topic is Your Body Has Rights Over You, Caring for Yourself While Caring for Others. And I'd just like to first mention that this topic was requested by a friend of mine for her mother, who was a carer to her father, but he sadly passed away last Friday. May Allah grant him Raja Zaman and all our family members who have passed away, Jannat al-Firdaus, and may he protect us all in this life from hardship and calamity. Ameen.
Ameen, ameen.
So just as a short introduction to the topic as well, we all know people in our lives that go above and beyond the call of duty in caring for their loved ones. In the case of elders, we are often reliant on their strength and support, but often do not realize that they are silently carrying this burden with difficulty. They might not realize this themselves. In some situations, they might not even realize if they're being taken advantage of and that they have a right to say no where there are others who could take over. This scenario is true for a carer of any age or background, and those that they care for could be disabled children, vulnerable adults, or anyone who needs physical or emotional support. The most common type of scenario is elderly parents supporting their adult children emotionally and even financially through difficult times. It could also be children or teens looking after a parent who is disabled. So what can we do to help carers recognize that they may even need help for themselves? How can they be supported so that they do not burn out and suffer physically and emotionally? Over to you, Dr. Naveed.
Thank you for that, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And so, I mean, it is a really important topic, and Jazakallah for organizing it. And it's I mean, obviously it's the qadr of Allah, but it's in some respects it's a bit unfortunate in terms of the timing, because obviously the person that first requested this, you say suffered a bereavement lately, and again that's just a reminder to us of how fragile life is, and as a community we've gone through a lot in recent months, and certainly over the last year and a half, and it's been a very very testing time for all of us. And I was just talking to a friend actually who lives down in Hounslow, and talking about this topic, and they were sharing in confidence to me, so I'm not going to mention who they are, that that they'd had a really difficult family situation as well, and they unfortunately, even in this day and age, they found little or no help and support, and they carried on in silence, and only sort of seeking Allah's help. And again, what we'll explore, inshallah, is the fact that it's not only takes its toll on your sort of mental health, but your physical health. So it's really important that, as you mentioned, Ibn, so that we do try to recognize this as a real problem as individuals, as families, and as part of the community. And certainly what what you're trying to do with these fora is provide that support. And I think part of it initially is about opening up the conversation and giving people the permission to talk about this and making sure that it's no longer taboo, which is very important and critical. So that's the first step, and I really welcome the opportunity. I mean, there are a couple of things we can talk about, but I do appreciate people may have questions, so I'm not going to ramble on entirely. But there's what we would call a support structure in sort of the social construct, and then there's also tips on how we can support carers in dealing with their struggles. And those tips could be around practical stuff, but also around sort of what some would the terminology will be around spiritual stuff, or a better connection with Allah, and how we can gain strength from that, because of the community that we're talking about. Certainly, as you mentioned, carers, can be of people in an older generation amongst your peers. You can be looking after children with special needs, but we do need to start off by recognizing that carers themselves have their own needs, which need to be addressed. And not just sort of medical needs. Sometimes carers need a break, what we call respite. Carers themselves may need help in being able to deliver the care most effectively. Sometimes that's another person helping them. Sometimes it could be equipment. Sometimes it could be better access to healthcare. So that these things are needs of carers. Sometimes carers need to start off by educating themselves, or we sort of provide them with better education about back pain, counseling, things that help them care more effectively and compassionately. So there's stuff that we can sort of do around the house, there's social support, and also there needs to be an element from sort of families and the community and the healthcare providers around planning. So it's not something that we sort of stumble on week upon week. It's important that there's a plan, and there's a long-term plan to provide support for the people who need the care, and also for the carers providing the care. So these things are really important. And I mentioned it now, we might sort of come on to it later, and I'm sure Farzana might be better at talking about this, but there are networks around people who provide care. You can register as an unpaid carer. There are online supports, there are voluntary organizations, there's the local council, there are carer trusts, but also it's important to mention the fact that you're caring to people like your GP, because sometimes you may not recognize that there are ways in which caring for someone else is affecting you. But if your GP or your healthcare provider knows those things, then they can have that conversation much better and provide that support. So there's those things which are really important. But as I said, caring can really affect people's mental health as well as their physical health, and if they're not provided with the right care, it can affect their mood, their concentration. They can feel tired, frustrated, angry. They may even have a sense of hopelessness or helplessness. And it's really important for us around people who are caring for others, as you mentioned in your introduction, to provide them with support, right? And again, we can talk about some ways in which people who are carers can sort of equip themselves once they recognize these issues to try and improve. And that's about your own, mental well-being and your physical well-being. But other things that as a community we need to address and talk about are things like, if we are looking after, vulnerable people, is talking about those challenges. And if we're talking about, the older care, people who are older than us, or that we're looking after, who have or are sort of closer to death, is talking about issues around bereavement and bereavement support and death, and having those conversations, almost normalizing those conversations, really, because that in itself should not be a taboo. And by talking about those things, it helps everybody, the family and the carers, in dealing with those things. So again, I really welcome the chance to sort of explore some of these things. And again, part of the other thing, just in terms of how we as individuals who are in that position of caring, I think we need to have a change in our mindset. There's almost like a paradigm shift in terms of how we think about things and our relationship. And you mentioned in the introduction, and certainly it's on the flyer, and I think it's a really good way of framing it, that your body has rights over you. And we talk in our community, which is obviously faith-based, but we talk about the rights that our family have over us. We talk about the rights that our neighbor has over us. We talk about the rights that another Muslim has over us. I mean, there's a very famous hadith that the rights of the Muslim are 6, and we all know this, is that when you meet your Muslim, you greet them with salam, and if they invite you to a meal or dinner, you accept that invitation. That's a right. If they ask you for advice, you need to give sincere advice. If they sneeze and they praise Allah, you ask for Allah's mercy on them, and we all know that. If they're sick, we visit them, and if they pass away, we attend the funeral. So these are the rights of other Muslims have upon us. But like you mentioned, we don't often think about the rights that our body has over us, and I think that's a really good point to start. And the Prophet he talked about this in a really famous hadith about the rights of the body, because there were some people, they were sort of trying, I don't know if they were trying to show off, or if they were trying to go uber religious, or to be seen as over spiritual. But there were rumors circulating that there's a group of 2 or 3 people. One of them had vowed to pray day and night, and one of them had vowed that he's gonna he's not gonna sleep. He's gonna pray the whole night through. And there's another one who said, I'm gonna fast morning and evening. So basically a 24-hour fast, not like what we do in Ramadan. And the other one says, well, I'm going to be so holy, I'm not going to marry anyone. And so the Prophet, he heard about this, and he got quite upset with that. And then he got on the minbar and he gave a quick khutbah where he basically said, look, I sleep and then I pray. I fast and then I break my fast, right? And I marry women. So part of Islam is doing things properly, but what they're saying is that your body has a right over you. And the Prophet something that he finished it off by saying that your as well as these things, your family have rights over you, and your guests have rights over you. So we do embody this philosophy of the rights of these things, and that's a really sort of critical and important sort of default position as Muslims, that we need to recognize that we don't abuse ourselves, and I'm not just talking about smoking or drinking alcohol or doing drugs and things like that, which we all know are haram, because that's taking it to the extreme. But it's the other things around maintaining a balanced and healthy lifestyle. And like we mentioned, I think before in one of the previous sessions, the more physically and mentally alert we are, the better our ibadah can be, and the better our relationship with God can be. So it's about sort of optimizing who we are as individuals, and you know, and then, you know, bringing that back to what's our purpose in life. And again, so it's really important that we do recognize that our body has rights over us, and not to push ourselves to the extreme. And unfortunately, we see in our community people not acknowledging that, and sometimes doing things, you know, to the extreme because they don't want to upset other people, or they don't want to burden other people. So, you know, the process on, you know, he told us that for every illness there is a cure, except for old age. He went on to say in that hadith that for every illness there is a cure, so go seek the cure. So it's incumbent upon all of us to seek medical attention when we are ill. And, you know, we talked about this before, we need to recognize those trigger points and then be able to ask for help. And there's nothing wrong in asking for help. The Sahabi did it, you know, the best generation. They knew the limits of their expertise. They knew the limits of what they could perform, and they had no shame in asking people for help. And it comes back down to what it is to be a good Muslim, is to recognize your relationship with yourself, with Allah, and with other people. And part of us being a good Muslim is to ask Allah for help. And we are encouraged to always make dua and ask Allah, even for the most, what we would consider, a lot of people would consider minor things. You know, the Sahabi, they would ask Allah for help in finding the right place for their goats to go out to pasture. You know, we would think of that as trivial. Why should I bother Allah? But the paradigm shift should be everything that we encounter in life, we should be asking Allah in terms of helping and supporting us. And that is part of the essence of tawakkulullah, of having that trust in Allah and recognizing our place in the scheme of life, in the qadr of Allah. And there are things that we can control and we can't control. And when we're caring for other people, it's outside of our control, essentially. And we're in that position, and Allah's put us in that position, and we need to deal with it as best we can, and not to be resentful, not to feel guilty, but to do the best we can and ask people for support in that. And again, I mean, I'm happy to sort of discuss other sort of tips around being more mindful as a Muslim, or just general practical tips on being a more effective carer. But that's just a quick introduction. So I'll hand it back to you, and then, as I say, I'm happy to explore other things if need be.
Thank you for the valuable information on the topic. I mean, a point that I was just thinking while you were speaking is that this kind of reflects the rise of awareness in the West and all over the world, actually, about recognizing boundaries and knowing when to stop, when to stop stretching yourself, and not just when to say no, but just recognizing that you need to have self-care. You need a time to rebuild and to just be with yourself, recuperate. So there is a general awareness of this. I think maybe not as much in our communities, sadly.
Yeah, I think we still suffer a bit of a sort of a toxic masculinity syndrome, or a very patriarchal approach. Yeah, where we want to try to plow through these without, you know, without asking for help, and that's not necessarily always the best thing to do.
Yeah, it is still deemed a bit shameful to ask for help, which is very sad. But we can now open the floor to questions. If you would like to open your videos and introduce yourselves, that would be great. And if you prefer, you can post questions in the chat room. Until we get a question, what help is available for carers, Dr. Naveed?
I mean, there's plenty of help, and like I say, I mean, I would first encourage people to register with the family doctor as a carer, and within the local sort of healthcare economy, within the GP surgery, it's not just the GP, but there's the practice nurse, there are district nurse, there are health visitors, there are all sorts of services that can be there to support people in that situation. The local council can also provide support. So there's a lot of online, places where we can access support. But it's first having the conversation with those people who are able to do something about it, and then again, there are other people in the community who are in the same situation. And it's about trying to network with those through volunteer groups, and then they will often signpost us in terms of getting the right help and support. So there are structures out there, and it's not that we're just doing it by ourselves. So it is key that we sort of start off and have that conversation. But certainly, when an individual needs those extra support, then that would be my first port of call, because oftentimes these people that we're caring for do have specific, health and social care needs, and so it's getting the conversation with, or having a key worker, or having conversations with key workers that can support us through that. So that's where I would start, but that aside, is things that we can do as individuals and as families to help, people who are caring.
Thank you so much. If I can tell you something that I sometimes now reflecting back, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, 2008. Then he had operation, this and that. But unfortunately, say that this country, when you're getting old, if you have money, then there's no help. I have been through all this. Only the help I got was when he was in palliative care. Then we had, otherwise, social services, people used to visit and say, oh, you will get an help, you should apply, counselor counsel. We did apply. I had to fill 100 pages, and they look through your statements, everything, that you are all fair. We never tried to sort of do anything wrong. At the end, we got a result, refused, that no, you cannot, because you own a house. We can provide you a carer, which will be £40 per hour. That was very expensive. So then, and I was lucky enough to get somebody privately. He was charging £50 a day, and that helped me a lot. But then, when he was admitted to, my husband was admitted to the palliative care, then we started getting carers. So this is something, and I just need to look into it, because it's very, very expensive. And I was looking after him with the help of my family, alhamdulillah, that we were managing. Otherwise, it is difficult.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this has been a problem for the government over many decades.
Indeed.
We have recognised that we need to. It's not just that NHS is not just about fixing people when they're very unwell. We need to have the health and social care support. And successive governments have not invested in it. And even when this current government in its previous iteration got elected, they prioritized health and social care. That's what they said.
They said, I know.
Before they got elected. But then, it never happened. And then there's another election, it's never happened. And there's another election, and it's never happened. But we just, as you say, we need to keep the pressure on. And again, people were saying in the Queen's speech a couple of weeks ago, there's no mention of social care. Yes, and it is really, important that we keep, lobbying for those. But like you say, it can be difficult. But again, we do need to start as a community to recognize that and develop these support systems and structures. Yeah. It's not just around those, those extra physical things. It's about the mental and social care support that we need to provide each other. And like you said at the beginning, people often feel quite lonely in that situation. And we need to get people to recognize that you know, they shouldn't feel like that, and there should be networks that provide,
Indeed.
Not just physical support, but mental and emotional support, as well as respite care.
Indeed, and especially mental support for the carer. I mean, mental and physical also, because it is. I mean, you love your person whoever is sick, but a time a body can take up to a certain extent.
Of course,
and as yes, and as you know, they're saying that I always think that when you sit in an aeroplane, they tell you belt yourself first, then you belt the other person. So if you're not fit enough, how you're going to look after the person who is not well? So this thing is so much in my mind. But alhamdulillah, I hope and pray that we as a community should have a strong built-up community network system, that we should look into this thing also. It's very important.
Completely agree. And that's a really, really good analogy, you know, for those of us who are fortunate to have traveled, is that, you know, you do get that advice that, you know, if there is a sudden drop in cabin pressure, make sure you put your own mask on and get your own oxygen, and then tend to your dependent people, and that is really important. And like you say, that is the similar philosophy we should be using in life, because as we said, our body has rights over us, and we need to look after that.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us, Sister Farzana.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
But how as we mentioned, that in our culture it is very difficult for elders to admit that they need help, or for anyone in the position who's of a carer, and outside of our culture as well. But how do you get past that barrier of reaching out? And we try to encourage, but to actually make the person accept our help, how can we do that?
Well, I mean, there's firstly, it's starting this conversation, and the person needs to ask for support. So part of it is staying connected with people, and we've seen that through COVID. It can be challenging because we're all forced to be at home, although we're sort of slowly opening up now. But we need to stay connected with family. We need to stay connected with friends. We need to utilize the tools that we have around social media. And again, it might just be, touching base on a regular basis with different people, or the same person that we've got a trusting relationship with. And then it's surrounding the people who are caring to talk. And there's no shame in talking, and we should encourage people to talk. And then we need to talk about the worries. We need to approach, as we've said before, it could be a healthcare providers or somebody we trust. There are helplines available, there are volunteers, but it is about starting that conversation. And once we start and reach out, then the person that is listening, as we said, they have a right, other people have a right over us. We give them sincere advice. And obviously, if it's something that's beyond what we can do, we should try and get other people involved and support that situation. But it needs to start with an acknowledgement, and then a conversation. So that's and one of the techniques that they talk about in terms of helping people reframe their ideas, because it as Farzana said, it can be quite challenging and lonely when you're providing care, and it's quite common to have unhelpful or negative ideas, and we need to start to sort of reframe those ideas, and sort of what some of the support networks talk about is we need to sort of recognize when we're getting those negative ideas. They've sort of termed a catchy phrase where you catch it, check it, change it, which is a bit like catch it, bin it, kill it when you're ill. But catch it, check it, change it, which is essentially recognizing when you're having these negative thoughts, challenging those negative thoughts, checking it, and then trying to replace those negative thoughts and reframing it. And this goes back to, you know, how the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to be, is to always try to think positively about the future, and to always try to think positive about what Allah can provide for you. And it's as I say, and it can be difficult. I'm not saying, you know, it's easy, you know, for people who are in a very difficult situation or have low mood or are struggling. But the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged us to try and always think of the best. So when, you know, when something happens, you look for the positive things in that, and you attribute the positivity to help and support from Allah. And it's about reframing our relationship with Allah and thinking positively about it. And it's a better appreciation of our situation, of the qadr that we're in, and a sort of a more better interaction with the concept of a tawakkul Allah, where we try to, as you mentioned, tie your camel and put your trust in Allah. So do what you can and put your trust in Allah. And part of that, as I mentioned it sort of earlier on, is the power of dua, is asking Allah for help and support. And through asking Allah for help and support, it does, or it should do, help us to have a more positive relationship. And again, these are ways in which we can start as individuals in tackling those things. But it is recognizing when we're in that situation and talking to other people. We can't expect other people to automatically guess that we're in a difficult situation. And you know, we need to have that conversation. Say, look, you know, I'm struggling today, or I really need to talk to somebody. And it can be difficult, but we need to not make it difficult.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. This is all our cultural things. As you say, Islam, it's so important to care about others. But as a culturally, we feel that, no, we should not be felt by others, though he or she is a weak person, not able to look after the sick person. So these things make us feel sort of isolated. Otherwise, if you really look into Islam and see that iyadat is, if somebody is sick, we are supposed to visit the other. It's such a big sawab, but not spending long time. Just go and visit for a few minutes and come back and ask if there is anything we can do in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, that's just the, you know, the perfect balance is where we demonstrate,
yes,
you know, because Islam, it is a social
yes,
deen. It's not just about your individual relationship with Allah. You know, it's manifest in three ways. It's your relationship with Allah,
yes,
it's your relationship with yourself, and we'll talk about that later on, and it's your relationship with other people. And Islam came to moderate all of those relationships. And as you say, when people are ill, we are almost obligated to visit them, but not to be a burden upon them. So like you say, it's a short visit, asking how they are, providing them with help and support, or food, or just a moral uplift, and then, you know, and then leaving, and just keep checking back. And these things are part of the deen. Unfortunately, living in the Western countries, sort of we've lost part of that.
That's right.
Which is, you know, which is partly expected, because that's not the prevalent culture of society here. It's a far more individualistic society. But we should try to, in our own communities, you know, revive some of these really positive attributes within the community. And again, it's, you know, these things have been shown even in medical research. I mean, it's a no-brainer that if you do these things, you know, it makes people better. It's, you know, their healing is faster and better, and people are happier. So, you know, it's almost, it's a no-brainer, but society's not geared up for that. But again, I value the opportunity to sort of talk about that. And if it is a taboo for some people, well, let's break that taboo and let's normalize that conversation.
Absolutely. And I think it's sometimes we don't really connect that our emotional well-being is connected to our physical well-being. We don't think that, you know, constantly being depressed or anxious is going to affect our bodies, but it does. And you must, you know, have first-hand knowledge of that as a doctor.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You know, you're completely right. They are, you know, so linked. You know, and
stress, especially. Yeah.
Sorry.
Especially things like stress and anxiety. I mean, some people live through a constant, you know, existence of stress and anxiety, and you know, at the same time they have physical illnesses and don't realize that they're directly, you know, if you come take a break, you know, manage yourself in that way, then your physical ailments will also reduce.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so just in you know, sort of in terms of that, it is, you know, for carers, is, you know, it's not just providing respite, which is really important, even if it is for an hour or two, or half a day, or a weekend. You know, if we recognize that somebody is in a very difficult situation, you know, we should try to offer help and support and give them that break. But again, there are practical things that, you know, the carers can sort of try and organize, or as, you know, friends or the community can organize in terms of people who are caring. It's just, you know, some of the practical things like organizing the shopping, getting things delivered, you know, neighbors, you know, calling in, sort of just checking up on a regular basis. Oftentimes, you know, people we're caring for have complex medical needs. It's making sure that the medications are ready, or the local pharmacy is aware and they can deliver. So these practical things will make the quality of life of the person being cared for better, as well as the carer. And like you said, if we don't provide that type of thing, then, you know, the carer can themselves start to feel stressful. They could be anxious. You know, it can affect the blood pressure, and it is, you know, it is about making sure that they are looked after. You know, and like I said at the beginning, if we don't educate carers on body posture, on lifting safely, you know, they can end up with back pain, which would make things even worse. So these things are you know, quite important. And as a carer, you know, or if you know carers, as we said, it's not just the mental health, but it's the physical health that they need to look after. So it's about recognizing unhealthy patterns of behavior, right? And, you know, part of looking after yourself, it is quite basic. It's making sure we're eating properly, we're drinking properly, drinking plenty of water, you know, and we always say this, again, it's not rocket science. It's, you know, good diet and exercise. And exercise doesn't need to be going to the gym. It doesn't need to be, you know, running or cycling or playing football. We can do exercise at home. You can do home workouts. And again, through, you know, one of the byproducts of this, you know, awful situation of the pandemic is that people have recognized that there are a lot of resources available, and online resources and free resources. You know, you can have tutorials about how to do 5-minute workouts at home. And you know, it's, you know, just even going up and down the stairs, or, you know, traipsing, you know, in the garden, you know, these things constitute workout, and it's about regularizing those things. And again, and I know it probably, you know, it's probably not there amongst a lot of the community, but we do need to say it's about avoiding the bad habits, about smoking, no smoking, avoiding alcohol, avoiding drugs. These are coping mechanisms that some people fall back on. And we need to acknowledge that even in our community, there may be people who fall back on these things, but, you know, it's about trying to provide support for those people and other support mechanisms. And other things that I think certainly, you know, carers can do in terms of looking after themselves is sort of avoiding a lot of negativity. So sometimes, certainly around COVID in the early days, we were telling people, you don't need to watch the news 24 hours a day. It will wind you up, you know. So regulate how much news you watch, you know, and you know, provide yourselves, you know, recognize what things you actually enjoy. And this is not just for carers. I think this is sort of just general advice for people who are just feeling a bit sort of low or isolated. It's, you know, what is it you enjoy in life? What are your hobbies that you like to do? What TV programs do you like? What things do you like to read? Do you like to go out for short walks? Or, you know, recognize those things and then try to find time for them. Put them in your diary to, you know, find time. And if you're a carer and you can't leave, you know, work around that when you can do those things.
I think so often when carers are taking care of somebody who's dependent on them, but they do take breaks for even just, you know, having a meal, or even that can feel guilt-ridden. And but I think what needs to be done is to substitute some of the spare time where they might just be worrying with actually, as you said, a hobby. You actually need to do something positive, physically positive, not just avoiding and taking a break, but substituting that with something to take your mind off completely, have a bit of enjoyment, and not feel guilty about it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other key thing, and again, I need to reiterate this, is getting good quality sleep, and that is critical, right? Especially for carers or people on stress pressures, is having good quality sleep. So having a regular routine, you know, where you have a sort of time where you know you will go to sleep, and your body gets used to that. And you know, having a restful environment, you know, in where you are going to sleep, and having a dark room where you blacked out, you know, thick curtains, you know, where you can, you know, switch off, and towards the end of the day, have a period where you are winding down or relaxing, right, and build that into your day. And some people, they do a bit of reading, or they'll, you know, keep a diary, or they'll do some breathing exercises. I don't know, but it's just about, you know, winding down. Other people, you know, if they're struggling with sleeping, then have earplugs, or have, you know, one thing I do I used to do in Ramadan is the period after Fajr, and when I have to get up for work, I would go to sleep with one of those eye masks, because that sort of blacks out even if there is, you know, daylight, and that helps me, you know, go to sleep. I know some people don't find that comfortable, but again, it's what works for you. Another things to avoid, you know, if you want to get good sleep, is avoid lots of caffeine at night. You know, don't smoke or, you know, drink alcohol and stuff like that, and stay away from your phone and other distractions. You know, you put your phone on charger away from the bedside, you know. So these things can sort of, you know, help. You know, good quality sleep can make a lot of difference, you know, in how people cope and have a bit of energy to get through the day. So I think those things are important, and setting regular goals, things that you can achieve on a daily basis. It's like I said, recognizing what you do, what you enjoy, and then doing a bit of that, and then ticking it off. And that sense of positivity can be a positive reinforcement. But keep the goals achievable. Keep them stuff that you know you can do. I mean, don't put down on the list, go for a walk, number 2, run a marathon. You're not going to do that. But it's got to be stuff that you think, yeah, I can do that. And then when you do that, think, alhamdulillah, I did that. And be thankful that you managed to do that. So, those little interests and hobbies are important. And as a Muslim, we can sort of Islamicize some of those hobbies, or some of those sort of, I don't want to say distraction activities, but some of those activities that we can then sort of use in a positive way to feel more connected to Allah, right? So, those things, as I say, are, are important, and we should try to bring them into our sort of, day-to-day activities. And some of the other things that I'm not, and unless there are any questions, I can sort of, go on to some of those aspects, if you want, in terms of, from a Muslim or Islamic perspective, how we can incorporate those things. But I'll just take a pause in case anyone wants to ask anything first.
Are there any questions from anyone, or even experiences of caring for somebody that you think might benefit the rest of the listeners?
Just wanted to ask Brother Naveed,
Your voice is breaking up, sister. Hello?
Hello?
a friend of ours.
Naveed hear us?
I didn't catch that, sorry.
Sorry, no, just wanted to check with you that I don't know about here in London, England. In Northern Ireland, when we lived, we had friends who had two learning disability children. So they were provided once a year's holiday, paid holiday by the social services, and they would take over charge of those children. Does it happen here also?
I am aware that those types of things do happen. Yes,
that's very good.
How accessible they are,
because the population, depending upon the huge population here, Northern Ireland is not that very. So that was a very good opportunity for them to get away and to be sure that their children would be looked after and they could relax and in a way and come back and. They had more energy to look after them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what. Thank you so much.
As you mentioned, even a break for a couple of hours or an afternoon is helpful. So if we know people who are in that situation where they are caring for someone who is vulnerable, as a friend, we may seek to offer, look, I can come, I can just sort of babysit for a while, and you can just take a break. You can still be in the house, or you can be in the garden, or you can just go to the shops. I don't mind. And again, it is about normalizing that activity, and it's not seen as a charity per se. It's just a good deed, and this is what I would do for you. And if the situation was reversed, I would hope that you would do the same for me. It's that type of thing.
That's the thing. That's a very good idea, and hope we all have this desire to help each other. Then we can achieve this goal.
Absolutely. I think that, as you say, a byproduct of the lockdown and of the pandemic is that communities have come together to help each other informally and formally. I mean, in our neighborhood, they had a WhatsApp group where you can, and a Facebook page actually, where you can register any skills that you have and the times that you're available. People can put down the needs that they have and what they require, what days they require it. And there was a lot of networking of just,
Yeah.
So I hope that it does continue afterwards as well when things are back to normal, inshallah.
That's right.
So I think, Yunus, you've got your hand up.
Assalamu alaikum, doctor. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, good, thanks. How are you?
Okay, alhamdulillah, not too bad. Thank you very much. How was your Ramadan?
Alhamdulillah, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed this Ramadan. I felt a really good connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I've hoped to have carried on a few things since then. So, it was really blessed. Thank you very much. And yours?
Alhamdulillah, busy, busy. A couple of questions I'd like to ask you, doctor, in regard to caring, is if you care for someone who has say has had a car accident or something like that, are you allowed to go see them in hospital, or does that really not happen in this day and age?
I mean, how do you mean? I mean, if they've been in an accident or they've been hospitalized, then
is it the lockdown age?
You can normally visit them in hospital, but as you mentioned, Ebenezer, because of the current restrictions around COVID,
Yeah.
You know, most hospitals don't allow general visiting like we used to have a couple of years ago. So they would only allow visiting that's, you know, absolutely essential, and from, you know, people who are, you know, first degree relatives, essentially. You know, so you know, we have to accept that, and you know, but there are still ways in which we can keep in touch. So most people have mobile phones nowadays, you know, and you know, if we want to keep in touch, then it's we can do it like that. And if they can't, one of the things we can do is provide them with a package that allows them to talk and discuss.
Okay. And my last question is, if you care for a loved one, because I just recently lost my grandma to illness, and I used to live up in Yorkshire, and I used to go like every 2-3 weeks up to Yorkshire and visit her, but she's no more in this world. If we want to give up our time to care for the loved one, is there a criteria for it? Thank you.
Give it your time in terms of from your employer, or from just generally?
From your employer, yeah.
I mean, most employers do have, or most good employers do have something where you allow some sort of carers, you know, sort of allowance for those types of things, and you know, others, you know, they allow sort of some voluntary work, or they can allow you some more flexible working around that. And certainly through COVID, these things are more acceptable. People do recognize that actually you don't always need to be in a lot of jobs in the office at the time. So definitely,
that's the same question I would like to ask Zibunis. What's the highest rate it can go up to?
Sorry, the highest rate in what?
Of care allowance. What's the highest rate it can go up to?
I'll have to look that up and get back to you about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's something that you can find out online on the government website, but I'll see what I can do, and I'll let you know, have your contact details.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm not sure if Dr. Naveed knows about that, but
I don't know. No. Again, I would say, you know, check online, get in touch with your counsel, and sometimes your GP or your you know, practice nurse, or those, you know, people providing care, they may know, because it's the type of thing that they may deal with on a more regular basis, certainly more regular than I encounter.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
But that is it's quite an important point as well. Sometimes you have people caring and they're not aware of the fact that there is a carer's allowance that can help them.
No, there is a social services, I think, department deals with that. Once the patient community and anybody's looking after, then they get a care from the government.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you for the question.
You know, so sometimes there are other sort of in-home supports you can have, social supports you can have, you know, equipment and other things. But the other thing is, as a carer, you also, again, as well as looking after your own needs, other things you need to ensure is that, you know, if you're looking after vulnerable people, make sure you have your flu jabs every year. You know,
I've just had 2.
Yeah, you know, and you know, obviously, COVID as well, when that's rolled out. But looking after your own health is really important, because if you want to protect the ones that you're caring for, and the ones that you love.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Naveed.
Okay. Are there any other questions from? We don't have any questions in the chat room. I just wanted to quickly ask, I'm going to mention names of organizations that I've listed, whether you have any experience of them, Dr. Naveed, or any recommendations. I'm just going to read out a list of carer organizations. These are actually for carers to find help from. There's Carer Watch, Carers Direct, Princess Royal Trust for Carers, Crossroads Caring for Carers. Then there's the mental health organizations, Rethink, Mind, Supporting Carers Better Network, Making Space, and the Children's Society, and Princess Royal Trust for Carers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I've not had any personal experience with those, but there's also Carers UK.
Okay.
You know, so there are a lot of organisations out there that, you know, are willing to offer help and support. You know, so it is worth looking into. And again, it's about reaching out. It's about acknowledging and starting that conversation. So those things are really important. And other things that we need to sort of think about, or one of the things that we've lost as a community and as individuals is a sense of our relationship with ourselves, you know, and we talked about that right at the beginning, about our body having a right over us, and having a good solid connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's, as Muslims, where we can get a lot of help and support, you know, and I talked about, you know, being positive and thinking positive, but also that there's a lot of other sort of structures within Islam which allow us to be in that zone. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, you know, nowadays around sort of being present and mindful, but as Muslims, we've had that for, you know, since the start of Islam. And, you know, it's not about, you know, being sort of you know, being a monk, you know, in order to discover yourself. I mean, there are ways in which Islam has already built in mechanisms where we can have a better understanding of ourselves. So we've just had Ramadan, and that is a yearly way in which we can rejuvenate and re-energize and reconnect with ourselves, our body, and other people, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it sort of rebalances things. So and coming out of Ramadan, we know how we can change and have a different relationship. And we had a different relationship with our food. We had a different relationship with ourselves and our prayer and our body. And it's acknowledging that and trying to build upon that. But there are other things that we can do that help us sort of solidify that. So again, in Islam, Prophet talks about the Qiyamul Layl, or standing up at night praying, or tahajjud. And if we want to sort of you know, be more have a better sort of understanding of who we are and how we can cope with things, it's about trying to, you know, bring about some of these positive habits, such as, you know, getting up in the last third of the night, you know, and praying there, doing a couple of rak'ah, asking Allah's help and doing dua, and forging a different relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other things that we can do in terms of formulating good habits is more dhikr, you know, and having these repetitive phrases that we do more often, and take solace in that if we understand the meaning, or, you know, do it on a tasbih and you know, use that as a way to start good habits. You know, and again, we just come through Ramadan, which is the month of the Quran. A lot of us have been reciting more Quran. A lot of us may be listening to more Quran, and it's just carrying that on. You know, putting, you know, the Quran in the background, putting it on Spotify. You can put it on your Siri or Alexa. You can play the Quran in the background, and that in itself can be helpful and soothing. And you know, so you know. You know, having alone time is not just during itikaf. It's finding space for yourself as a carer to do these other things, and you'll find that hopefully you will be more compassionate. You'll have more shukr, which is a core element of, you know, being a good Muslim. You know, having a shukr of Allah as well as your tawakkul Allah. So these things are really important. And if we want to take it to the next level, then use that alone time to do more reflection and contemplation. So, you know, things like tafakkur and tadabbur, where we take time out to think and contemplate and reflect, and try to perfect ourselves, and to have ihsan, know that Allah is watching us. So that there are, even within Islam, a lot of ways in which, as individuals, we can get a better relationship with ourselves, with our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and try to derive some strength from that for our difficult situations. And hopefully through that we become more mindful, and sort of strive for more sort of peace and tranquility, or sakina, in how we sort of do things on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just recognizing that there are things that we can do, sort of other practical tips. There are sort of what some would term spiritual tips, or better connection with Allah that can help us in these really challenging times.
Absolutely.
Indeed. MashaAllah, Dr. Naveed, you have reignited Islam so much with your talks. Really, alhamdulillah.
It's just a blessing from Allah. I'm just hopeful and grateful for the opportunity, and that people may benefit from it, inshallah.
Thank you, Doctor.
God, mashallah.
Definitely, I mean, it's a bridge between daily life as well as religion. So
yes,
there's a wealth of information there.
Yes, there's so much information that reignited our religion, have shaken us up. How to be thankful, really. Alhamdulillah, you have really awakened us up in a...
all good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, it's yourselves providing the opportunity where we can have these discussions. So thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time. We hope you found our session today useful. If you don't,
very good.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
If you want to offer feedback on this session or suggest any workshops for the future, please get in touch via the email address mentioned. I've also put a direct link on the WhatsApp group messages that you can join the WhatsApp group through there as well. There's a list of the societies I've just mentioned in the chat room too. Thank you, Brother Yunus, for attending as well, and for your questions.
Inshallah, we'll see you on Sunday.
Inshallah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Naveed.
Thank you
for your time, and Sister Frizan as well for your support.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum.